Welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host, David Lesh. We are always encourage you to stay connected. Tweet us at today's verdict. Motor vehicle accidents happen all too often, and if they result in an injury, many times you do not know what your rights are. Who pays your medical bills, your loss of earnings? Don't worry, Mitchell Frankel returns to our set to help guide our viewers through the process. Mitchell, thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
All right, there was a tragic accident last week involving a pedestrian knockdown, a woman who was hit. Allegedly, she was in the crosswalk. We're not quite sure. It was a left turn case. When we're talking about motor vehicle liability, you got drivers, passengers, pedestrians. You see any one more than the other in the type of practice that you've been doing lately? Or?
Not really. I mean,
it's basically the same?
Pretty much.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about insurance because I think our viewers really need to know how important it is that there's some type of fund to collect. When we talk about insurance in motor vehicle accidents, what do we really mean?
Well, insurance covers a few things. First, you have the insurance that will cover your medical bills and your loss of earnings. And typically that's covered through what's called no-fault insurance. And that's something that is provided by the car that you're in, if you're a driver or a passenger, or if you're a pedestrian, it would be provided by the motor vehicle that was involved in the incident. As well.
And that would cover your medical expenses, right? If you're being treated.
Up to $50,000 for medical bills and your loss of earnings as well.
Let's talk about your pain and suffering, right? Because obviously, like this woman, she lost her life. But many people, they end up treating for months and months and months. Right?
Or years.
Oh, years. And their quality of life is never the same. So you're looking for another particular pot, one that doesn't attach to the no fault or to the law or to that vehicle that's paying your bills. When we talk about personal injury coverage, what do we mean and in terms of insurance exactly?
Well, it's called third-party liability insurance, and that is typically, provided by the vehicle that was the tortfeasor, the offending vehicle. And there's all different amounts of coverage, but in New York State, the minimum coverage is $25,000 as a minimum, which, as you know, is very inadequate.
It's very low. I know with taxi cabs it's a little higher.
For taxi cabs in New York City, it's $100,000, so that is better, still low, but
which leads to a very important discussion involving the ability for you to purchase additional insurance that could really cover you if you're involved in an accident with a car that doesn't have adequate insurance. What do we mean by that?
Well, I mean, if you have a vehicle, you have the option of purchasing what's called UM or SUM coverage, which is if a car or motor vehicle injures you or someone in your family, you can look to your own policy. And when I say someone in your family, someone who's a family member, resident of your household.
And lives in the household.
And lives in the household. And for a relatively small premium per year, you can purchase this coverage.
Let's give us an example. Let's say, unfortunately, you're hit by a vehicle that only has a $25,000 policy. Let's say you're a pedestrian. What would you want on your own home car, which is sitting in your driveway that you might be able to attach to?
Well, you'd want it as high as possible, but certainly you'd want anything above $25,000, which would be the minimum. You'd want at least $100,000. If you can afford more, premiums obviously.
But let's say you had that 100, and there was only a $25,000 policy that hits you. You can go after an additional $75,000 against your own car, even though your own car had nothing to do with the accident sitting in the driveway.
Exactly. It's two matters proceeding at the same time. You have an action against the tortfeasor or the offending vehicle that caused the injuries, right? So that's the $25,000 that you're referencing. If that's the minimum coverage. And then you would file simultaneously a claim, and you would want to put your carrier on notice that an incident occurred and that there might be inadequate insurance for your injuries that you sustained. So you'd want to put your own carrier on notice that you have a claim, and if you had that 100, like you said, you would have an additional $75,000 above the $25,000 to file and go after to compensate you for your injuries and loss of earnings and medical bills, etc.
Certainly, you would recommend, in your experience, to at least pay the extra premium.
Absolutely.
And get the extra, either the $100,000 coverage or $250,000 or whatever it is that you think that you really should have, just in case, God forbid, something happens to you.
Absolutely. And as you know, David, an additional 75,000 if you're badly injured isn't going to go a long
cover
way.
very much.
Doesn't cover very much
All right,
at
so
all.
let's get into the accident site now. So we're on, there's been a tragic accident. The police show up. Why is that police report so important in terms of being able to prove your case, in terms of taking the case as an attorney many times? Walk us through that police report.
Well, it's important for several reasons. One, it identifies the name, driver, owner of the vehicle or vehicles that are involved in the incident, so you can identify who the players are. That's one. And by getting who the players are, it also will help you determine what insurance policies may be in play.
And many times I see, and moving a little bit farther, that description part, which describes how that accident happened. How many times I'm sure clients come to you and say, well, Mr. Frankel, that's not really the way it works, the way it happened. I didn't tell the police officer this. Or, I wasn't in that left lane. I was really in the middle lane. This isn't correct. What do you do when that happens?
Well, certainly it's not helpful, as you know.
No, it's not.
It is you're behind the eight ball right off the bat, especially if the police officer writes that the vehicle operator number one or number two, whichever one you happen to be, states that, because he's indicating that he took a statement basically from you at the scene of the incident and that he's writing down what you said. Obviously, the sooner the better that you correct. The sooner you go in and correct it, the better.
Can you correct it?
You can go to you should go immediately to the police precinct and request to file an amended police report saying what is in the police report is not accurate, is not how it occurred. The other side will certainly use the first police report to defend the action against you.
Let's talk witnesses. Many
Sure.
times the police report, you flip it over to the other side, you got a list of witnesses. How important are contacting those witnesses early to hopefully prove your case later on?
Crucial.
And how do you do that? I mean, do you send the client there? Do you have an investigator go? Would you talk to himself? How do you usually approach the witnesses? Because we know how important they are. Really.
Well, it could be various ways to do it. Typically, you don't ask your own client to go interview a witness or speak with a witness. You could send an investigator, or you could call yourself and contact the witness, try to find out the facts as they know. And as you know, as time goes by, memories fade. So the sooner you get to them, the better. And also, you can be sure that the insurance companies and their lawyers are going to be looking at that police report, and they're going to contact those witnesses and try to get their statements as well, and maybe put, you want to get to the witness as soon as
quickly
possible.
as possible.
Yes.
All right, let's get into
Bottom
the case,
line.
and I want to talk about two particular things that I think are so important when your action is already commenced. One has to do with being able to prove that your injury is considered to be serious enough, and that will decide whether or not you'll be allowed to get compensation. When I talk about serious injury, tell the viewers what I'm talking about, really.
All right. Well, it ties back into what we talked about before with no-fault insurance. Years ago, when no fault was installed in, or adopted by New York State, they basically said, we're going to give you, regardless of whose fault it is of the car incident, collision, we're going to give you medical coverage up to $50,000 and included loss of earnings if you can prove it. Okay, you can submit for that claim. In exchange, no matter whose fault it was, you get that. Even if you're 100% at fault as driving a car, you can get medical.
No fault.
Exactly. However, in exchange, I guess, or one of the other sides to that legislation was you can only bring a third-party action if your injuries are what's deemed to be serious or threshold injuries. You may consider them to be serious, but the courts have determined over the years what's serious and what's not. Obviously, there's certain injuries that are clearly...
It certainly would be a case-by-case basis, right?
Yes, but typically it's the soft tissue injuries, where someone's claiming their neck or their back, pain, this, that, where the defense likes to argue these are threshold injuries. You don't have the right to sue. And
As opposed to, say, a broken bone.
A broken
maybe
bone.
Even surgery, those types of things that the court might say this would be a serious injury, or this could at least go to a jury to determine whether.
So long as you can show that it's connected to the incident. So if you have a surgery, you know, a month or 2 or 3 later, after the actual collision or incident, you're going to have to show that it actually is connected to the incident, the surgery.
Let's talk defenses, because not every case is a viable case, or even if it is, sometimes the person who gets injured has done a few things wrong. The seatbelt defense, for instance, right? Most people don't realize that, but it's the law in the state of New York. You got to wear a seatbelt.
In the front seat.
Okay.
Well, if you're in the front seat or if you're under a certain age, in the
And
back
what if
seat.
you're not? Does that mean you can't bring a lawsuit as a result of the accident?
No, absolutely not. It just means that the defendants have a defense to your claims. Basically, the argument goes that, let's assume you're a driver or a passenger in the front seat, for instance, and you're in an incident and you badly injure, you break some bones in your face because you slam it on the windshield or on the steering wheel. The argument would go, well, had you been wearing the seatbelt as you are required to do, it would have engaged and it would have stopped you from slamming your face into the steering wheel, the windshield, what have you, and therefore you are responsible for a certain
Percentage of it.
percentage of your injuries. Yeah, because but
But
in
that's
order,
fair. Because listen, if it's your responsibility to wear a seatbelt and you didn't, you should
Sure.
lose that portion of the monies that you normally would be getting if you were wearing one,
you should be wearing a seatbelt
no matter what.
whether in the front seat or in the back seat.
And which leads me to my next issue in terms of that you should be in the crosswalk when you're crossing, you know, because that's very important. And if you're not, that probably could also be a defense. Am I correct?
No question. If you're in the crosswalk, it's certainly you're safer for a variety of reasons because you're more likely to be seen by the drivers. You're not darting out in between cars in the middle of a block. But sure, of course.
Tips. Someone's watching right now, their family member, somebody was involved in a bad accident. What would be the first thing you would tell them to do? Let's say they're home, okay? They're home. They went to the hospital, whatever. What would you tell them to do quickly? What would you want?
Well, if at the scene of the accident, they certainly, if they have the wherewithal to do it, take photographs. Everyone has a cell phone these days with camera ability. Take pictures.
And most importantly, where do we find you?
You find me at my website, Sussman, www.sussman-frankel.com. You can just Google my name, Mitchell Frankel, or you can call me on 212-688-8895.
Good stuff. And you'll come back for a third time, right?
Of course.
Or a fourth. I don't
Fourth.
know. You've been here so many times.
Fourth.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us and, of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out at www.bronxnet.tv. Also, remember, if there's a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesh@bronxnet.org or tweet us at Today's Verdict, and make sure you hashtag Ask Today's Verdict. From myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.